Hello, everyone. Welcome here today. I was told that we had people from 17 countries joining us for the conference. Who here in this room is from a different country? I see. Where are you from? Where's everyone from? Yes. Sorry? Oh, Panama. I spent 7 months, I lived there for 7 months once, about 12 years ago. Long story, but it was lovely. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So thank you for joining me in what is my favorite topic, and that is Long Miami. This is a phrase that I started using in the immediate aftermath of COVID, which I saw as a cataclysmic event that sort of supercharged our society's progression into a 20th century world away from modalities that we had established before the internet. And I saw early on that this region and this city were poised to really ascend onto the world stage. And I started using this phrase because when you say you're long something, like you're long a stock, that means that you believe in its upside. And I very much believe in this city's and this region's upside. And we're going to go through a presentation that quantifies why, what forces are shaping it, how they're shaping it, how these macro forces are driving what we see in our markets in terms of our micro data, our market data, and how the press is getting it wrong, because they very, very much are. And they continue to get it wrong to a level that's ridiculous. We're going to go through some examples here. And since this is an election day, I am extra excited to be talking on this topic during an election day, because one of the themes that I've been discussing throughout is that part of what's driving Long Miami is societal polarization. And I take no joy in being correct when I say this, but we see this in the election, how it's playing out, both sides going crazy. And this is just the state of affairs of where we are in America today. And this is part of what's driving what's happening. So again, I'm going to preface, as I always do, that I'm a registered independent. I'm not aligned with any party ideologically. I'm very pragmatic when it comes to my politics. So when you see trends here that could be construed as political, they are not. It's empirical data. It's going how it's going. It's not due to any sort of political bias that I may have. All right, so let's dig in. The first thing I'm going to start with is a picture that I hope is inspiring and sort of ignites our imaginations as to how much can change very quickly. This is Brickell Key in 1979 and then Brickell Key in 2022. In 43 years, it went from nothing to something. And there is this fallacy that I keep talking about in the human consciousness that the present is sacrosanct, that change can't happen quickly. Well, it can. And that happened in that one little small area before COVID supercharged the world. And then to set the stage also for two important points I'm going to cover. One is that we have segments of our market that are transacting at all-time highs that are hugely positive stories, and the press is not telling them because they love the negative stories. If it bleeds, it leads. Past 1,000 a square foot, for example, in this chart here, for single family, we hit an all-time high in transaction volume in the first 3 quarters of this year. That is not a headline in the press. Reporters that love to quote me refuse to quote me on this, by the way. I've sent this to many, many reporters. They refuse to print it. And then second chart shows that despite all this talk of inundation of inventory in the markets and so forth, across the board, we're still about 30% below where we were pre-COVID in inventory levels, and that's without any market segmentation. So again, bear with me here. This is a story we're going to tell based on empirical data, and there are 3 main themes that are going to sort of coalesce and bring it all together. One is that change is inevitable and history does not go backwards. I do not see a reverse mass migration of people back to high tax states. So we're going to get to that. Number 2, this is early days. Momentum cycles build. They do not just reverse. And as real estate professionals, it's important that we recognize where this flow is going because it's not going to change overnight. And then 3, that long America and long Miami, it all ties in. It's a positive story, and we need to interpret it as such and align with it as such, regardless of who wins the election. We're very lucky to be in South Florida, regardless. These patterns are not going to change. So I like to start with this quote. It sets the stage. It's a quote from Einstein, who was a genius, so we should probably listen to him, that if we have a problem to solve, we should spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. And we're going to take this approach in Long Miami. We're going to address it through a series of questions. Also, I studied theoretical math and physics at Columbia, so we're going to geek out. This is how my brain works. We're going to build a case. And then no one can accuse me of political bias either, because we're going to make an iron-tight logical case for what's happening here. And again, it's also super important for you guys to understand, which is why I do it, because the press, as I keep saying, is going to keep getting it wrong on shocking levels. And you need to be able to communicate to your clients why what they're reading in the press might not be true. All right, first, what is Long Miami? Long Miami to me means long America. And again, on election day, this is a very important thing to remember. America was built upon entrepreneurship, but this is not this creation force. It is not a static thing. It's not going to stay in places that are not hospitable to growth. So the human spirit, entrepreneurship, it flows to the paths of least resistance. And this is that force that built America. So long Miami equals long America means that sort of this force is not killed. And again, it'll flow to the path of least resistance, and South Florida and Miami are emerging as one of these capitals, one of these new 21st century epicenters that are most conducive to growth and to entrepreneurship. Next, why is change inevitable? And why is there so much of it now? I think we've all noticed this. The last few years, there's been a lot of craziness, a lot of polarization, a lot of stuff, a lot of change. So why are some points in history characterized by rapid change? Well, there is a... Hold on. Uh-oh. Oops. Hold on. Okay. I have been using this Venn diagram since the advent of COVID. And this is why I had no reservations in saying that it wasn't going to go backwards and that we're in a period of rapid change into a reality. We were in a period of time where the after is going to be very different than the before, and it's not going to go backwards. When we look at history, there's sort of three categories of forces that usher in major change, where there are huge changes to realities and ways of life. One is what I'll call empire cycles. All empires have cycles, including the U.S. empire. We all know this. In our current country, we're in a period of internal disorder. We see it in polarization, wealth gap, belief systems. People now, of course, are moving in accordance with their belief systems. And what do we have? We have May 30th. We have the first time a former president is convicted of a felony. June 11th, the first time a sitting president's child is convicted of a crime. And July 13th, the assassination attempt of a former president. So this is what I call kind of like the Brazil model. We're going this way. And it's not going to reverse. And this internal disorder in and of itself ushers in change. Two, we have tech adoption. Think of what the Gutenberg printing press did for Europe. Well, what happened at the end of the 20th century? We got the internet. The internet came slowly. It came piecemeal. It was not always this amazing fast thing that we have today. If you remember, at one point it went like do. It wasn't. We brought it into existing habits. COVID came and it broke habits long enough to allow for the formation of new ones, which is when I get to the third force, which is war and pandemic. Wars restrict the movements of people. That's what COVID did. It broke habits and allowed this supercharged adoption of the internet, which pushes us into a reality that's different from the 20th century pre-internet reality. And we are in the middle of this Venn diagram, as I've been saying for the last 4 years. So it is very, very much not going backwards. It's not a flash in the pan, what's happening here in Miami. It's not a bubble. It's not driven by debt. Actually, it's driven by cash. We'll get into that. It's driven by cash and migration of people around habit change. Next. Okay, back to what I was saying. So COVID was this grand accelerator away from 20th century realities. If you think about it, New York City was the capital of the 20th century world. All the office buildings, all the habits, the way of life, it was established before the internet. Before New York, London was the capital of the world. London didn't all of a sudden blow up. It wasn't obliterated. There's nothing so dramatic, but there was a shift in focus, and there is always a shift in focus. Nothing is forever. And we're in a period of history right now where the focus is shifting away from these pre-internet 20th century realities. So let's recognize what the 20th century gave us. It gave us personal income taxes, 1913, and it gave us, Henry Ford gave us the 5-day, 40-hour work week. So why would we be trapped by this reality forever? It was not a forever reality. And as we see in the data coming in, there's a shift underway. Immediately post-COVID, the highest adoption rates of mobile work, telework, were amongst people making over $200,000 a year. So it's logical. It stands to reason. The more money you make, you are more likely to avail yourself of the internet for your work, and you are more able to move. And we see this reflected in the data. We also see a divergence between people with college degrees and without college degrees, also when it comes to how much they move. That's the second chart. So it shows that people who with higher education moved at a greater rate, there's divergence post-COVID, than with lower. Again, that's because they're more likely to use the internet to work, and they're repositioning themselves. They're no longer trapped in their high-tax jurisdictions. Next, the Wall Street Journal. I have not agreed with their handling of Florida. They sort of underplay our success because we're poaching their taxpayers. But I do like what they call here, this branding they put here, this term, the high-tax brain drain. And that is exactly what is going on. There was data released by the IRS showing the movement of millennials, of young people earning over $200,000 a year gross. Florida is the big winner. And the Wall Street Journal finally recognized this and finally recognizes the negative impact this will have on the points of departure. You are losing young people who are in the very early stages of their careers and of whatever it is they'll be creating, and they're leaving. Next, this is something that I put together recently. And this is kind of shocking. It shocked even me. So the census releases intrastate migration data every year. They released data for 2023 2 weeks ago. They give you these raw charts, this data. So I took all their raw data and I did a very simple net loss, net gain chart, and I ranked the states. I then also put the top marginal state level income tax bracket for each state and whether the governor was a Republican or a Democrat, that's secondary. Again, I'm a registered independent. These are just patterns. So draw whichever conclusions you like. But what we're seeing here, baseline, is a very strong departure from high-tax states. The top two gainers, again, were Texas and Florida. Florida is right behind Texas when it comes to net migration gains in 2023. But keep in mind, we are 4 times smaller than Texas, and we got essentially the same net population gain due to interstate migration. After that, we have North Carolina, so forth. And again, the 2 biggest losers, California and New York, and that has not changed. And their top marginal state-level tax rates are over 10%. And I did the averages. The top 5 gainers averaged a tax rate of like 2.3%, and the top 5 losers were over 10%. So this is a very, very clear migration of people out of high-tax states, and it would stand to reason that if you're not paying taxes, this isn't affecting you. So taxpayers are leaving. And again, 8 of the 10 winners or population winners were states with Republican governors. 9 out of 10 were states with Democrat governors. Is it a correlation of policy or tax rate? I don't know, but this is, again, simple observation, and I do not see this reversing. We're not going to see a mass migration back to high-tax states anytime soon. All right, so these are 2 prime examples of how the press is getting it wrong. And I put this after that migration chart because I have a theory that they're not exactly rooting for our success because we're taking their taxpayers. And I know the resistance that I've experienced with the press when it comes to printing any positive Miami headline. To the contrary, I keep finding complete fabrication to a level that's disturbing because I catch these fabrications because I'm an expert in the field. If I was not an expert in the field, I wouldn't realize it was a fabrication. And it makes me wonder, what else are they fabricating? So there's a Newsweek article that was out in I believe it was June or July, that had this headline saying Miami home prices are plunging. They referenced Realtor.com data that was not even for Miami. It was for an aggregate area like Miami, Pompano, Fort Lauderdale, and it was for list prices. And it wasn't clear what it was talking about. Single-family condo, I don't even know. But whatever the case is, I couldn't even replicate that data, and it wasn't even Miami-specific, but the headline was Miami-specific. So great. I wrote Newsweek. Nobody cared. They didn't answer. Fast forward, about 3 weeks ago, Business Insider publishes an article with this headline: home list prices are down as 12% in boomtowns, and they have a list of top 10 places that are kind of crashing. And they have, again, this aggregate of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, and they say median list price dropping, plummeting. This is not true. And it is a complete broken telephone copy of the Newsweek article. So this journalist for Business Insider actually contacted me via LinkedIn a week before the article came out and said, hey, I write about real estate. Do you have any data? And I said, why, yes, I just finished Q3. Here you go. I sent her my Q3 report, never answered me. And then they printed this. So I wrote to the entire editorial board at Business Insider saying that this is a complete fabrication. And if you fabricate with words, that's one thing, because you could say, oh, we misread, But if you put a number and the number is completely false, like, what are you doing? So they put minus 12.4% change year over year. That's completely false. List prices are up. Resale prices are up. Like, it's just wrong. And they didn't write back. They don't care. They act with impunity. So everyone, watch out, because what else are they fabricating is the question. I caught this because I'm an expert. All right, next. Here's the reality. Meanwhile, CoreLogic ranked us, this is through the first half of the year, as having the highest median increase in prices in the country. We have charts here that are through Q3, showing again that year over year, even Miami-Dade condo market was up 1%, single family up 10%. So quite the opposite of what those headlines would lead you to believe. And one has to wonder where the journalistic integrity is. Okay. Next, third question. What forces are driving the wealth and talent migration, and is all this sustainable? Because remember, if we want to identify where something is trending, we have to identify the forces pushing it. Values are just snapshots in time. I can tell you the median price is 10, but if you don't know what force is pushing it, you can't identify directionality. So baseline, what's fueling this is the migration, is population growth. So population growth has continued through 2023, where Florida and Texas are the biggest winners. And last year Florida surpassed New York, and now we're the third most populous state in the nation. And again, this is not just any population, we're taking taxpayers. To that point, the pattern is clear. The red map shows marginal tax rates across America. And the other map is from 2022, but the patterns are the same. I just like that map. It shows in those swooshes where population is heading. And again, if you'll notice, it's leaving from high tax states that tended to be high lockdown states, that tended to be blue states. And back to that chart that I made before, it is the same thing. This is what's happening across America. So we have to ask ourselves, will this reverse? That's a question. Do we see mass migration, net positive mass migration back to high tax states? I don't think so. And that is a fundamental force that is driving our markets. There are always anecdotal stories. Someone's going to say, oh, my friend's cousin moved to Miami and hated it and went back to New York, went back to whatever. Well, I mean, good for them, but the net is what matters. And so that's what you have to ask yourself. Why would this magically reverse? Why would people all of a sudden en masse decide to go back to high tax states from which they left post-COVID? Next, to this point, this is a great data point. This came out in the Wall Street Journal last year, that for the first time since this metric has been measured, the 6 fastest growing southern states now account for more of national GDP than the Washington, D.C., New York, Boston corridor. And again, why would this reverse? Next, here's some more charts showing the shift, what I call the shift in economic center of gravity. This is outflow, adjusted gross income outflows into southern cities from northern cities that tended to be high tax. And again, harking back to that chart that I published from the 2023 migration patterns, it all makes sense. This one I love. This is assets under management migration. For the first time ever, the state of Florida now has more AUM than the state of Connecticut. And again, why would this go backwards? Next, forward-looking indicators I tend to like. One, we're getting the highest number of high-value millennials. Millennials are earning over $200,000 a year. And also as a city, we lead the country in new business formation per capita. So these are very positive, forward-looking indicators. This is not just a phenomenon of old people parking money. This is people at the start of their careers coming here to create, because again, we're emerging as one of those places that is most conducive to growth and entrepreneurship. Fourth question, where do we see the effects in our markets? And this is very important. As real estate professionals, it's important to recognize which segments of the market are benefiting from this wealth and talent migration, because it is not spread evenly. Our market is very much bifurcated, it's not a monolith, and different segments are benefiting differently and responding differently to what's happening around us very differently. And when the press reports in the market as a whole, that story is lost. Because, right, by definition, half the market transacts below the median, right? Most transactions happen at lower price points. And so when you report in the market as a whole, you lose the story of what happens at higher ends of the market, which are benefiting from the wealth and talent migration. So we had a report this year from Knight Frank on global super prime. And when it comes to 10 million plus sales, we were number 4 in the world. They list 11 cities there. 2 of them are in South Florida. We have Palm Beach and we have Miami. If we add them together, we're number 1. So this is a generalized boom of the region of high net worth individuals moving here. 2, this is one that I really, really like that also the press refuses to print. This is the growth, the transaction volume past $1,000 and then past $2,000 a square foot. When you look at data, when you look at sets of data, it's very important to recognize where you see spikes in data, where the change has happened. When you see data go kind of up, down very quickly, something happens. Some force happened to change that market. And when we look at our market, the sharpest change is at the very high end. Past $1,000 a square foot, past $2,000 a square foot, the single-family home market this year is up 875% versus pre-COVID. That's almost 10x in terms of transaction volume. And it's 77% all cash. Condo market past $2,000 a square foot, 81% all cash, and up 486%. So these are tremendous, tremendous increases, and we see this as a clear reflection of the appetites of the wealth and talent migration. Oh, and one point I'll add when it comes to single family, why single family here is outperforming is Miami, thank God, is not afraid to build. We need inventory. But when it comes to single family, especially within proximity of the urban core, we cannot add more inventory vertically. So there's an inherent scarcity play when it comes to prime single family, and that's why I think we're seeing this overperformance in the single family home market. Next. Wall Street Journal reporting that 4 of the 10 best job markets are in the state of Florida. And then here's a shift here from pre and post-COVID. 6 of the 10 priciest neighborhoods were previously in California. 7 of 10 are now in Florida. So do we see this reversing? Is money going to start flowing back to California? I think that's a low probability event. Next, cash. I also keep seeing articles about Miami being a bubble. I think it was UBS had a whole report talking about Miami being a bubble, number one bubble. And they based that whole definition on appreciation of prices. Appreciation of prices by themselves do not indicate a bubble. Bubbles are almost always built upon irresponsible usage of debt, of over-leveraging. And when the underlying asset can no longer service the debt, it crumbles like a house of cards. And that's what happened in the crash, everyone recalls. That is not the market we have today. We have a market that is heavily, heavily cash, and the higher up you go in price, the more cash it is. Even at $1 million, condos in Miami-Dade in Q3 were 72% all cash. We can do a breakdown across South Florida. This is, I call this Show Me the Money. This is aggregate data for Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade County, showing cash percentages across different price ranges for single family and condos. As you can see, it's heavy, heavy cash markets throughout. We can break it down here by county at the higher prices per square foot, tremendously high cash buying. So this is not a bubble at the high end, at the low end, anywhere. There are no liar loans. I should say none. Very, very few, not different phenomenon last time, and heavy, heavy cash throughout. Next, here's another report that came out this year, actually about 2 months ago. So Henley & Partners, they're a leader in residence and citizenship by investments. They keep track of where high net worth people are moving. So Miami leads the list as a destination of centimillionaires. On the same list, we have Boca, we have Fort Lauderdale, we have Naples, we have Palm Beach. We have basically half the list is Florida. And again, I don't see this reversing. All right, so it's important to recognize, as I was saying, that we have two markets. The segment benefiting from the wealth and talent migration, as we just saw, and then other segments, older inventory, which is in peril. This is very much true, but these are separate dynamics going on. People moving to us from high-tax, expensive cities were never buying older inventory, so that segment was never benefiting. So we kind of have two different markets going on here. As an example, drops in transaction volume, this is important to recognize, drops in transaction volume are due to drops at lower prices, losses of inventory. If we look at single-family homes, the green lines are the third quarter. Transaction volume is down 3% year over year, but over $1 million, we're up 10% year over year. So it's important to segment your market when you're talking about transaction volume. Similar phenomenon in the condo market. We're up past $1 million. We're up versus pre-COVID. Below, we are not up. For the general market, we are not. Now, media myth. The media loves to talk about transaction volume losses in isolation, but it's important to recognize, especially at the low end, this is really due to a loss in inventory. Here is a stat that most people find shocking. Single family below $500,000 has supply down 85% versus pre-COVID. So of course transaction volume is down because the inventory has essentially disappeared. It is not a reflection of market lack of desire to buy. There's just no inventory. Similar, if we look here, past $1 million, 500 to $1 million, we're at all-time highs for transaction volume in the single-family home market. And again, this is a very positive story. 6 months of inventory. It shows great demand in the market, and this reality is not reflected in the press. Fifth question, is it still early days for Long Miami, and is there room for growth? Well, as we've been saying, momentum cycles are very real. They've begun to build, and as I keep saying, politicians are not incentivized to care. Why would there be a reversal to this wealth migration from high-tax states? The top 1% of taxpayers account for over 40% of taxes levied in high-tax jurisdictions. You lose just 10% of them, you've decimated your tax base, and you've increased that death loop of taxation and of politicians with socialist leanings increasingly pandering to the growing percentage that does not pay in because their only incentive is to stay elected, and they act with impunity. That is it. Most politicians just want to get reelected, and they will pander to whoever will vote for them by promising them whatever, and they will keep driving out money. We have an example of Jeff Bezos. His home state proposed a tax, unrealized capital gains, targeting him and 5 other individuals. He left, and his departure lost 45% of their projected revenue. Okay, I mean, they couldn't hold him captive. Next, when I talk about things not reversing in negative momentum cycles. So we're in the early stages of positive momentum cycles here. Our feeder jurisdictions are, unfortunately for them, experiencing the opposite. New York, for example, wanted to challenge recent census numbers because while they lost population, tax-paying population, as we saw, they gained migrants to whom they give prepaid debit cards, and they wanted those migrants counted in the census, obviously for purposes of congressional votes. So this is an example of a negative momentum cycle. How they go about reversing this, I don't know, and I'm from New York. This makes me sad, but it is what it is. Sixth question. Why would the forces driving Long Miami reverse, and how long will Long Miami last? So why would they reverse? I don't know. I don't think they will. I think that our pre-internet capitals are dissipating. There's always change. And I do not see this grand reversal that would all of a sudden impel all these people to go back to high tax states that were high lockdown states. Meanwhile, we're building stuff. We're building office. Between just Citadel and Santander Bank, we have over 2 million square feet of Class A coming to Brickell just between those two buildings. And there is more. And all of this new office is bringing in high-paying jobs. Who else is building office in this country? I mean, I don't know. We're seeing office selling at less than replacement costs in San Francisco. It feels like every other week there's a story like that in the press. Next, we have visionaries. We have people who have made fortunes off of their abilities to predict trends early, going all in South Florida. So if Ken Griffin, who's built an empire, get off his ability to essentially to predict what's happening in the world, if he's all in, I would rather believe him, as I keep saying, than journalists who probably have socialist leanings and are actually upset that we had policies different than theirs during COVID and that we're winning. And that's where most of those negative headlines are coming from. Seventh question, how do we align with our region's ascension? So we have to recognize, just to wrap all this up, that these forces are not going to dissipate. It's not a flash in the pan. These are real forces. This is a change in a way of life away from something that was a pre-internet, there were pre-internet norms. It's being pushed by tremendous wealth migration, and I don't see it reversing. The incentives pushing actual taxpayers, creators, entrepreneurs, innovators away from states that were high lockdown, that are high tax, I don't see that reversing. And I think it's important to understand that and to recognize that the press isn't on our side. So we have to communicate this clearly to clients, to colleagues, etc. And I'm going to end with this chart because I like to wrap this all up in a positive bow because it is positive. We have an election today. Regardless of who wins, Florida will keep winning because the forces that are driving wealth migration are not changing, and Americans are moving in accordance with their interests and with their belief systems, and that is not going to change. The country is going to keep polarizing, I believe, for the next 10 to 20 years as this has just started to play out. But all of this, listen, it's on an upswing. Who here would choose to live 100 years ago? I would not. Humanity goes up, our way of life improves. It's just important that you align yourself. Not every place is equal. Not every place is going to be good at the same time. You spin the globe and you put your finger on the map, not every place is good to live in. But there are places of the world that are at any given point on an upswing. South Florida is one of them, and we're very lucky to be here in what I consider still the early days of the region's ascension. So I'm 20 seconds left. I'm going to end my little training for life thing. So as many of you know, I train and compete in jiu-jitsu. It's my crazy little hobby that keeps me somewhat sane. And what martial arts or combat sports or anything competing teaches you is the power of your mindset. Because all this information is useless if you can't wrap it in a positive construct in your own mind and believe in the inevitability of your own success and that it is all a positive story moving forward. To not get phased, to not react to things around you in a way that is negative to you. We cannot control the outside, but we can control how we interpret it. And if we believe in the inevitability of our success, we take it all as a real-time positive and we align ourselves with the growth and prosperity that has just begun to flow to our region. That's it. Thank you, everyone. This is where I post all my stuff. Give me a follow if you like. Thank you.